To shortly introduce myself, my name is Magne Bjørndal, and I grew up on a farm in the western part of Norway. I was born in 1958 and am blind since birth. As was common in those days, I attended a school for the blind from the age of 7. There I was introduced to Braille, a knowledge that I have benefited on ever since. I became part of the transition into mainstream education of blind and visually impaired children. So from the age of 10, I left the school for the blind and continued at the local school at home. Eventually, I became a student and started my theological education. I, of course, used a lot of audiobooks, but Braille was also important, especially when learning the Greek and Hebrew languages. Since 1991, I have been working as a pastor in Church of Norway. In this occupation, Braille is such an essential tool that if someone had cut off my right index finger, I'm quite sure that my career would have ended immediately. But with Braille being a tool at my fingertips, I'm able to preach and lead services, funerals and weddings, and take notes at meetings, just to mention a few examples. Even though I'm fully aware that most of you know Braille very well, I will try to give my presentation in such a way that it should be understandable even for those with limited knowledge of this incremental means of reading and writing. Is Braille a language? No, not really. In its simplest form, it only represents symbols for letters and signs in a way that makes it possible to feel them under our fingers. Instead of representing an O as a visible circle, we render it as the upper and lower dots in the left column and the middle dot in the right column in the 6 dots Braille cell. So, in principle, you could use Braille to make every language on the planet textually available. But there is, of course, more to it than that. With only 63 dots or combinations of them within one Braille cell at our disposal, we have to let a Braille symbol mean several things depending on the context in which it appears. The O symbol that we just mentioned must also serve as Greek omicron, just to give one example. Braille isn't a language, but there have to be rules for how to write it correctly in a similar way that is needed for languages. Another challenge with Braille is the huge amount of space it occupies when produced on paper. I newly read a novel that came in 2 heavy boxes containing 17 volumes. The sighted readers get it in 1 volume with about 500 pages. To decrease the space somewhat, there have, from early on in the history of Braille, been developed abbreviations, also called contracted Braille. In English, the word about is rendered AB, and the word for is replaced with all the 6 dots, just to give 2 examples. This practice is common in some languages like English and German, while it's not used in others. Louis Braille was from France, so he, of course, had his own language in mind. He made some contractions part of the rules for French Braille, As far as I understand, it differs a bit whether or not those contractions are being used. In the Nordic countries, the use of contractions differs a bit. In Danish, they are quite commonly used. In Swedish, they are now used very rarely, according to the Authority for Swedish Braille. Finnish Braille has no contractions. In Norway, the use of abbreviations is debated. This means that most of the text produced in Norwegian Braille is uncontracted. It also means, I suppose, that most of those learning Braille today are quite unfamiliar with contracted Braille. Norwegian Braille may be produced in 4 different formats: uncontracted and 3 grades of contracted Braille. Grade 1 should be quite easy to learn, while grade 3 is somewhat complicated. Even though I'm strongly defending contractions and am using them a lot, I certainly am aware of the disadvantages they have. One of them is, of course, that abbreviations vary from language to language. About isn't a word in Norwegian, so we don't need to abbreviate it. To read Braille produced in a language that uses abbreviations, you therefore will have to learn not only the language itself, but also the contractions related to it. This can be more or less difficult. Some years ago, I tried to learn German Braille, but eventually I gave it up. It seemed to be too complicated. One benefit of contracted Braille is, as mentioned, that it will save some space. How much will vary, but it is in the area of 10 to 15%. This argument isn't as important as it used to be, since more and more Braille is produced not on paper but electronically, to be read on a Braille display. Another benefit is that abbreviations make it easier to take notes. When you are attending a lecture or a meeting, you are of course free to write whatever abbreviations you like, as long as you are the only one who are supposed to read the notes. It is, however, much easier to use abbreviations or to stenograph, if you like, if you are familiar with a set of contractions that is specifically designed for your language. In addition to saving space and making it easier to take notes, contracted Braille also increases the reading speed, especially for the slower readers. The only one who, as far as I know, have studied this scientifically is the fabulous Norwegian teacher and inventor Jan Bruthaug. He concluded that you will spend a certain time reading a given space filled with Braille, for example 1 page. If there's more text on that page, because it's abbreviated, you'll read more text during that amount of time and thus reach a higher reading speed. He also stated that it's easier to interpret short words than longer ones. By abbreviating frequent words, you therefore make it easier for slow readers to understand the context, since they don't need to spend that much energy to interpret the Braille symbols. In the 1970s, I spent some summer holidays working at a Braille press. The material we made available was produced by punching the dots into zinc plates, from which paper copies were made. For obvious reasons, we could only produce one version of each text. Nowadays, Braille production is, of course, computer-based. Qualified people are using special software to produce files that can be sent to an embosser. In most cases, texts still are produced in only one version, but automating the process to a great extent, by automating the text to a great extent, it's also possible to make several versions. An example of this is the Braille edition, or should I say editions, of the Norwegian Bible. In 2011, we got a new translation, or more correctly, 2 new translations of the Bible. The need for 2 translations is due to the special situation we have in Norway with 2 forms of the same language. This, together with a debate about whether or not to use contracted Braille, made us ask, is it possible to let the reader choose between the 2 Bible translations, combined with uncontracted and the 3 types of contracted Braille? If so, we would have to make 8 different versions of the Norwegian Braille Bible. We decided the answer was yes, and after several attempts and a great deal of work, the project was finished in 2016. The Norwegian Bible Society made the text available in USX, a kind of XML format. The text was converted to Braille via LibLouise, a library used to give Braille output in different languages. Perl, an open source tool, was used to make software that created a layout that makes it as easy as possible to find a certain chapter or verse. The Bible consists of approximately 100 volumes, and I need about 8 feet of bookshelf to store it. In addition to the Bible text itself, every volume also contains notes and references. Nothing is printed unless someone has asked for it, so there might be parts of the Bible or Braille versions that have not been printed. That's okay, since the production process is automated to such a great extent. This Bible is published by KABB, a Christian organization offering media content, fellowship and more to visually impaired people. To give people with the sight loss access to the world of Braille is an essential part of enabling us to live independent lives. This requires education given by dedicated and qualified teachers. It also means that high-quality Braille has to be produced for a lot of different purposes. The software used in this production must be developed and maintained as an ongoing process, where active Braille readers must be involved. In the beginning was the Word, according to the Gospel of John. I'm certainly thankful that I'm able to feel them under my fingers. Thank you.